Recording.
All right. Here we are, folks, and we have entered the next part of our story in Genesis, but as I'm sure you all have already noticed, it's familiar, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So there is a lot that I was, why I signed on so close to the hour is I was reading up on all the history of some ideas of why this is so familiar to some of the Abraham stories.
Mhm.
So let's jump in with that idea off the bat because I'm pretty sure we all picked up on it. What have we heard before? What's familiar in this section?
Mhm. There's a famine. Yeah, there's a famine. You have to go somewhere. The people might be hostile, so you tell them it's your sister, not your wife.
You got it.
And then the leader of the other group is angry about it,
Yes.
although he handles it a little differently this time. He doesn't give them a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah. And then at the end, the like second big chunk of this story, we have the whole issue of wells again.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, this is almost like a speed run of a lot of the Abraham story. Like this story, when we were with Abraham, takes a few chapters to get all through these different chunks. Now we're gonna zoom by them. So yeah, you picked it up in large strokes. This is a very similar story. So some yeah, so just out of the gate, why might there be this repetition, do you all think? Just out the outset, like why repeat all the same stories? Is it because he's living into his dad's legacy? Is it something else going on? Mary Ellen?
Well, it just comes to mind that they only had oral history. And by doing the repetition, it brings everything into play for all the people who are listening to the oral history and kind of a reminder to them how all the parts and pieces overlap and come together. So that's my reaction.
That it's helpful to like when you know the story, that like the repetition just helps play the story over and over again, and you can change out the few characters, but the overall framework stays the same so you can remember it better.
Well, and it's not just adults who know the story who are listening to the oral history. The younger people are being exposed and learning their history. And so it just makes sense to me that they're tying it all together to preserve the oral history. So.
Well, yeah, but later it was written down, and I would have thought when they wrote it down, somebody would have said, oops, there's two stories that are the same. And they, it's the kind of thing when you say they needed a good editor. So I'm wondering if it has to do also with making a very clear connection between the generations that not only so that you would remember it, but also so that you could see that in many ways Isaac and Abraham were I don't know, were similar, or they are related, or that's a part of their lineage, or they both have a special connection with the Lord and whatever, I don't know. I think it sort of diminishes it in some ways because you think it feels like a slip up. So
yeah. So Larry, what are you thinking?
Well, weren't we all taught in speech class that you made your point 3 times in every speech in order to be sure it got across? Plus, the scribes who were recording this later on may well have been motivated to be faithful to their history, the story as they heard it, and to write it down as accurately as they could, so it would now be preserved. whereas before it had not been.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I kind of thought that there might have been some additional routes being established for various cities or groups of people, and that had not been covered before, but I didn't fact check that. But
Okay.
I got the feeling they were just adding more information about ancestry and the cities and so forth.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you can kind of see that in how there's not just one well named this time, but there's like 4 or 5 different wells. And so there is more geographic information included.
Right.
So yeah, so let's recap some of what you all have brought out, which I think are all brilliant responses, is oral history and repetition. That you just repeat stuff, and the more you repeat it, the more you can remember it. There's Larry, I like the make your point 3 times. There's the 3 part of it. But also, I mean, Sue, I think this also connects with what you're saying. What it means to edit. When they were compiling this, they have different standards. Today we're like, you're repeating yourself, pare it down. They're more like, we have 3 stories that are similar but not the same. So we I keep going back to our discussion with Noah, where they literally like threaded them together. Instead, they're like, these are different enough, we're going to keep them apart, and we're going to preserve all 3.
Okay, Abraham did it twice, right?
Yeah, Abraham did it twice. There's one time in Egypt and one time with Abimelech. Quick note on Abimelech's name. It's the same name that was used the last time, likely different person. The title, or Abimelech, if you go into the Hebrew, the B and B sounds are connected, depending on the vowel you put with it. That means father, and Melech means king. So his name's Father King. And so it's kind of just generic king name is Abimelech. He's the Father King dude. So kind of like how we refer to all kings of Egypt as Pharaoh, and there's a lot of Pharaoh, like Ramsey pharaohs. It's kind of a similar thing. So it's not necessarily talking about the same person, because if it was, King Abimelech would be really old, because he was Abraham's contemporary. At any rate, so yeah, these stories are different enough. It seems like they wanted to keep them separate. But the last element that kind of we've talked around a little bit is the archetype that's being set up here. Like, how do you act like the one who has God's blessing? So say Abraham's like the first guy who's given the covenant, and he kind of acts out this story. And now the covenant is bestowed onto Isaac when we concluded last time. And or was that 2 times ago? I think it was at the beginning of last chapter when Abraham dies. The blessing literally passes to Isaac, and now this is the only chapter we really get of Isaac being the main character, and his time being the main character. He is fulfilling this, he's doing the same things with the same blessing as his father before him. So there's a bit of an archetype going on here. So any other thoughts before we jump into actually walking through the verses to talk about what's going on verse by verse here of the overarching narrative that we have here? All right, let's dive in. So it is interesting. There's as we walk through, I do want to pay attention to the differences, because the story seems semi-aware of the other 2 versions and then kind of not aware of the other 2. And part of the interesting conversation with why this is similar and different is, one theory is that this is of a different storyline or a different source than the other stories. Where the other story sources, there was one that was the J source and one that was the E source, the Yahwist and the Elohims. This seems to come from the J source.
Hmm.
But the thing is, it's more similar to the E source last time. So the J source for the Abraham cycle was when they went down to Egypt.
Mhm.
The E source was when Abraham went to Abimelech. And now looking at the language, notice all the lords in reference to talking to God. This is seen as a J source narrative, but it's more similar to the second round that was not the J source. So there's a question of whether this is the same story that got split apart.
Okay.
That's the last detail. That's the very like academic heady side of it. But we have we have the return of the famine, which just famines happen in the ancient world because weather's unpredictable and they don't have the modern conveniences like big systems where you can water plants from underground aquifers. That just doesn't exist. But there is this acknowledgement that it is besides the famine that happened with Abraham. So there's kind of that acknowledgement that it's happened before.
Mhm.
And so Isaac gets on the move. The other weird detail is, did you all notice that Isaac and Jacob are nearly absent from these stories?
Mhm.
Yes.
Like the kids are born and now they're just kind of like not in the picture,
Esau. Yeah.
but that's okay.
Yeah.
So after we hear the famine, they need to go somewhere. We have from verse 2 to verse 5, we have God all of a sudden talking directly to Isaac like God used to talk to Abraham, and it
Right.
uses very similar language. And so what do you think? Because once again, this is, I mean, I've lost track actually at this point. How many times have we had the recitation of the covenant?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's included in this version of the covenant?
I'm-
Yeah, Mary Ellen?
The thing that jumps out to me is the Lord is giving this covenant to Isaac, but not because Isaac made an individual covenant with God. He's getting this because in verse 5, this is happening because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. And so it's not on Isaac's individual connection with God. He's inheriting this from his father.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a major difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
But God is still the one that bestows the covenant.
Yes,
I mean,
always.
this wasn't a mutual agreement. Like it did sort of sound like when with Abraham, you know, the two of them sort of negotiated this covenant. This time there isn't any negotiation. Isaac's getting told what he's getting and what to do.
I think Isaac already thought he had it.
Well,
So that's actually a very interesting point, Sue, where Abraham was initially lacking all three elements. I mean, we see it very, very clearly spelled out: land, offspring, blessings. That is the recitation. Those are the three promises in the covenant. Isaac has those three at this point, doesn't he?
Yeah.
well, does he have the blessing?
From his father.
Oh, the
That's
blessing, yes.
if you put your finger and go back to last chapter, where does it have? There we go. So chapter 25, verse 11, after the death of God, God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac settled in that town. So the covenant, like the word the covenant and blessing can get exchanged sometimes when it talks about it being transferred.
Oh, yeah, but okay. So Isaac was blessed by his father Abraham, but he wasn't blessed by God.
Interchangeable. So the blessing of Abraham is kind of the responsibility of the covenant.
Okay.
This comes into play in the next chapter, because Isaac or Jacob and Esau are going to fight over this one.
Okay.
So the blessing is kind of the continuation.
Okay.
So that's why I say it's happens where the blessing gets shifted from Abraham. Abraham in that mode is more like he's kind of fulfills a bunch of different roles, and occasionally he's more prophetic. It's more like him bestowing God's blessing on behalf of God, more that like prophet, priest, you're now going to carry that. And then we see Isaac kind of repeat all the Abraham things. So, but this is the time where, because now Isaac is the blessed one, he is the one carrying on the covenant, God is now talking directly to him. He's now the communicative, the one who's the interface. However, what is the difference between Abraham, who negotiated this and kind of had that more buddy almost relationship, where there's a certain level of casualness, where God expected something of Abraham and then Abraham expected something of God, versus the child who inherited it and has most of the covenant set up and is just asked to respond, who's just asked to like follow because you've already got all the goods, basically. How does that feel different? Mary Ellen.
Isaac didn't make any promises to God. You know, we've talked about covenant before, that it's a two-way promise. And Isaac is just the recipient. He hasn't, you know, communicated his, I don't want to, the word is coming to me as submission, but I don't want something that strong. His work with God, that he will continue what Abraham had set up. There, you know, we don't hear from Isaac on this.
Nope. He was nearly sacrificed as a kid. Just do want to set that up. Like, he's been involved, and so like there might be something a part of that. But you're right. Isaac kind of just, this is where he can be seen as kind of a limp noodle. He just kind of goes along with it, but he doesn't offer anything other than just agreeing. Gary, did you have a thought there?
No, I was just agreeing
Okay.
that he's going along. He came from a different background, and he doesn't feel like it's time to challenge anything.
Yeah. So keep this in mind, because the person that takes on when you hear the covenant talked about often in other parts of the Bible, they will say the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You get the three patriarchs often. Remember the difference between how Abraham responds, how Isaac responds, and we're going to get how Jacob responds, because all three of them are very different in how they interact with the covenant and how much agency they assert. Agency, would that be a good word, Mary Ellen, that he doesn't assert a lot of agency in accepting the covenant? Mary Ellen, yeah.
Would you define the word agency? You use it and in a way that I'm not familiar with it. So
Okay.
Could you clarify that?
Yeah, so what I'm meaning when I'm talking about it is, when I think of someone who is not asserting their agency, I envision a person who is just doing what they're told, even if they have the power to choose otherwise. Sometimes you see the person that they went to college because their parents told them what to do. And like their family was a U of M family, so they just went to U of M. And then the family encouraged them to become a doctor. So they're like, okay, I will become a doctor. And then they get married to the person that the family approves and says, oh, that's a good person. And you see that while they are making choices, they are not considering necessarily for themselves if they want those choices. And that's what I mean by asserting agency, where we will see that, I mean, Abraham is not making passive choices, but making active choices. He is actively choosing to leave. He's actively choosing to interact with God.
Yeah. Isaac doesn't say anything.
Mm-mm.
Except the next thing he does, he lies. The next.
We'll get to the lying in a moment, because he is different than Abraham in this one. But agency in that, like, are thinking about it, like, are you able to make your own choices and do what your desires are? But also, are you willing to assert your ability to make those choices? Thinking about someone asserting their agency is like breaking from family tradition, because it's, you both have the power and the ability to do so, and you're doing something that you want to do.
So it's coming from you, not from another source. You're using your agency, you're using your own principles and, where you stand on things, not what has been given to you before. So Isaac is not using his agency when Abraham did.
Right.
Okay.
Or an interesting one is Rebecca actually asserts a lot of agency in her story. She is more of an active player. When we saw her get married and her family was like, here's your choice. And she doesn't just do what's acceptable. She chooses, and she will continue to choose. She's a very active person in the story.
Okay, I understand.
Cool.
Thank you.
So, Sue, I think you pointed it out that, Isaac doesn't respond after the covenant. It's just like, okay, here's the assertion, here's the blessing again. And it's not because of his actions, it's because of his dad. And so he's just like following along. He's inherited the family business. And
but it's a pretty good deal.
Yeah. I mean, you can't blame him.
Larry, you're on a roll today. Keep it up.
So the one instruction he is given is, don't go to Egypt. Don't go to Egypt this time. Just go to the Southlands, and you are eventually going to inherit them, is kind of the rationale. But he does the same thing as his dad, which, this is why I joke, like, did he just, this was before he was alive, so it's not like he saw dad do this, but he maybe heard stories of dad do this, if you want to like get in the character's head. But he chooses the same route of, just say you're my sister. This time he's not given the excuse of, she's actually my sister. This is very much not his sister. And then no one tries to abduct her this time. That's the good news, is that no one actually tries to steal Rebecca, but he is caught playing with his wife. There's a pun here. I don't know what your Bible's translated verse 8. Mine says fondling.
Fondling.
Isaac is Isaacing. That's the joke. Isaac is Isaacing. He is laughing, he is playing, he is there. It's an innuendo. It is very clearly an innuendo that he gets caught having fun with his wife.
My Bible says sporting.
Says what?
Sporting.
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 That's not a bad translation. They're getting it on together. Anyways, evidently didn't close the curtains well enough, but he is caught in the act, and the king is like, excuse me? What are you doing with your sister? So evidently now it is no longer acceptable to be married to your sister. There does seem to be a little bit of a difference there. But what is similar and what's different in the response to this situation? So he's caught in a lie, and this one's just a flat out lie. He doesn't have the excuses of Abraham. This is just a lie. What's different? What's similar here?
Well,
Mary Ellen, did you have a thought?
When it happened to Abraham, they were in Egypt. And when the Pharaoh found out the truth, he sent Abraham off with gifts and everything to create goodwill, but get out of here.
Yeah.
And this didn't happen with Isaac. That Abimelech was worried about what could have happened.
Yeah.
And it did not send Isaac away, at least in this portion of it. And instead, Abimelech warned all his people, leave these two people alone, the man and the wife.
Yeah.
And, pretty severe with whoever touches this man or his wife shall be put to death.
Yeah.
So he's putting his protection on Isaac and Rebekah, but they didn't have to leave with great wealth like Abraham did.
Mhm. Right. So this situation does not enrich Isaac and Rebekah.
Right.
They
Protects
don't
them.
make money off of it like Abraham did. But I think it's good to keep the idea of that protection for the second half of the story, because it's doing something. Like, he still gains something out of it. And I think don't kill these two people is still profiting off of the situation.
Okay. But not monetarily like
Not
his father.
monetarily, correct. Yeah. Larry, you also look like you had a thought there.
Well, no.
Okay. Oh, I saw you flipping through earlier, so okay. Yeah, so any other thoughts of this whole kind of Abraham remix?
Yeah, I got the idea when Abraham and Abimelech, Abimelech gives him all this stuff and says, get out of here, and he goes. Whereas this time, Abimelech says, he gives them protection. And then there must be a significant passage of time, because now Isaac's got to accumulate his own fortune, which he does.
Right. So one very curious line that, when you read stories hundreds of times and then you read it and a line catches you weird, look at verse 12. Remembering what the family business is, in that they are nomadic sheep herders, Isaac sowed seeds in the land and the same year reaped 100-fold. When did Isaac learn to farm?
The Lord taught him.
I guess so. I've never paid attention to that before, but that's the only time we see Isaac or any of the family farming. But
well, he had a lot of workers and so forth. I mean, he's accumulating a lot of people as well as wealth. And so he's got farmers, they do that, and Isaac can tend the sheep, I guess.
Well, maybe the land is better there. Huh.
Well, it says the Lord blessed him. So, his crops were well fertilized.
So yeah, we do see this transition of time through this next little passage. So evidently Isaac's a little bit taking up farming. He's found a plot of land. Doesn't say he buys it, just says he sows it. It reaps 100-fold. The Lord blessed him, and the man became rich and prospered more and more until he became very wealthy. So evidently he has like exponential growth. He's hanging out in this area down kind of in, if you think modern day Israel, Palestine, it's in like the bottom part. Not yet in the Sinai Peninsula, but close to it. That's kind of where they are. And he possessed flocks and herds and a great household. So even the Philistines envied him. And if you remember our conversation from a bunch of weeks back, the Philistines are a very metropolitan culture. They come from the rest of the Greek states. They were rich enough that they packed up boats and they sailed here and kind of colonized a little bit. They are already wealthy. So if he is wealthy enough to make the wealthy people that were already there envious, you can kind of imagine what kind of wealth they're talking about. But then the locals oh, we get this little side note in verse 15 that when Abraham left, the locals filled in the well, evidently because they were not happy about it, which kind of sets up the rest of the story. So like the well that had like Abraham's claim to the land is now no longer in existence. And the locals are like, you're too powerful. We don't want to deal with you. Please leave. And so we get this series of stories of wells and moving like further and further away from this group of people and what's happening, that like they dig a well and they find a spring and then the locals claim it. They dig a well and then it's contested and then they move farther out, and like this kind of leapfrogging of like, where is it okay for them to sink this well and kind of have a little bit of claim on the land? So what do you all think of this kind of contentious interaction? And this, Mary Ellen, is where I think it comes into play that Isaac and Rebecca are protected, so the people can't kill them. So how are they exerting power if they're not allowed to harm this family? Yeah.
Well, by filling up all the wells, you can't farm and you can't water your animals. And so they're making it impossible for him to stay. But it's kind of like, here's your hat, here's your coat, and I'm going to slam the door on you when you leave.
Just.
Mary Ellen, your sound cut out for a moment. Ooh. Mary Ellen, can you check your internet connection? I think you're jumping in and out.
Yeah, it
No, it cut out again.
But I just clicked mute that made you do that. So I'm going to keep my mute on.
Okay. We could hear you again. That's the good news. So other thoughts of this kind of leapfrogging of like from one well to another and kind of pushing them out, making life miserable enough that they're like, go farther.
You know, into filling each of them.
Yeah.
And then God
They
intervened.
Keep moving, he's too wealthy
Did
for,
they fill them?
yeah, fill the wells.
So why would they want to push the wealthy person away? Like what threat is this? Why push money bags away?
Competition.
Okay.
Jealousy.
Jealousy and competition, yeah. See, we saw with Abraham when he got wealthy, people were like, oh, let's make a covenant with you. Hey, can we set up business deals? Hey, we want you on our side. And that's not the reaction this time. This time it's like, no, we don't want you close. We're not going to set up business deals. There's something, I don't know, I don't have the answer to this, but it's interesting that Abraham's wealth brought him connection. And it seems like Isaac's wealth is having him being pushed away.
Hello?
Yep, go for it.
Well, it's like Isaac at this point is not only the wealthiest man around, he also has the protection from Abimelech that no one shall harm he or his wife. And so they can't go to war at some point. And if it ever happened, Isaac definitely has an edge on it. And so, it's kind of like get rid of him before he becomes too powerful, and there's nothing that we can do about it. No more.
So if Isaac got in his head that he wanted to be king, they're like, we can't protect ourselves from you. Yeah. So with the various wells that they drop in, each of them, I hope your Bibles have like notes at the bottom that sometimes deal with translation, because the first well is a translation of contention. The next one is enmity. And the last one that it says they sunk and there was like no quarrels over it. the word kind of translates to either a broad place or there is room. It's spacious. It's like we're far enough away that like each of us has our own space. So we get that well that's sunk and everything seems okay.
That's Beersheba.
Not quite. I am in verse 22
Oh,
because
22.
something funny happens in 23.
Okay.
So go back to verse 23 or 20.
Oh,
Well, there he was in the land of Beersheba. So we see that title pop up again. And then in 24, we get God making a covenant with Isaac again. This is, once again, this is probably, or I have no explanation for this one actually. But I am the God of your father, Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bless you. Make your offerings numerous for my servant Abraham's sake. And like, we get like another affirmation of the covenant, just dropped in there again.
Well,
And they pitch their tents, they build an altar, and it says there Isaac's servants dug a well. And so we see there seems to be a confusion. And I was trying to read in the notes and I didn't see much. My guess is this is they stitched a few Isaac stories together, more like the Noah version, just because Isaac doesn't show up that much. This seems to be a bit of repetition that I'm not quite sure why it's repeating. So my guess is they're stitching it together. Larry, what's up?
okay. Well, doesn't this show that Isaac now has found a safe place for himself, you know, and now he is settled in a place. The king Abimelech, you know, now they're sort of more on equal, separate but equal areas. Whereas when he was back living in Abimelech's territory, he was a threat. He was
Right,
a threat to the people. Now he's away, he's separated, he's found his own place. The Lord has blessed him. He's building an altar. They've all pitched their tents and they're all in good stead.
Yeah. Yeah, Mary Ellen?
It's also a reminder that Isaac did not accomplish all of this on his own, that the Lord was with him, the Lord provided, the Lord fulfilled the covenant to Abraham. It's not through something that Isaac did to deserve this. It just kind of like, okay, he's in a safe place, he's in Beersheba, he found his home. However, just remember, he didn't do this on his own.
Ah, there we go. So the reminder that like all of this, Isaac is not independently wealthy, he is God-given wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the blessing, this is part of the covenant, this is, we had it up front, and now we're gonna like bookend it with the other side of like this thing that transpired, that's God. Where I get curious again is we've had this whole well drama, we have the affirmation of the covenant, and kind of like you were saying, Mary Ellen, the assertion that like this is God working. And then we have well drama again. And it's interesting how, so in the previous section, the well that is sunk is Rehoboth, which means a broad place, which seems to be the well that is acceptable, but then we have the creation of another acceptable well. And I'm wondering where the repetition in the story comes from. At any rate, Isaac is set up on the edge on like, not just the edge of town, but like in his own little place. Abimelech then seems to drop by, say hi, and Isaac's not happy to begin with. He's like, you guys pushed me away. Like, why are you coming to me now? Like, geez. And what do you take of Abimelech's response? Because Abimelech seems to be like, hey, you can't blame us. What do you think?
Well, Abimelech sees him as the anointed one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sue, what were you going to say? Sue Fish, did you want to add in?
I can't remember.
Okay.
think I was just going to say something obvious. I don't know.
Okay. Mary Ellen, what's up?
Abimelech comes to him and is almost kowtowing to him. I can almost picture him figuratively on his knees in front of Isaac and saying, can we please make this covenant that, we didn't hurt you and yours, you were with us. Can we make a covenant that you won't hurt us? And it's like Abimelech is just taking a very subservient approach in this, which I find interesting. So.
Yeah.
I think he sees Isaac as powerful and blessed by God. Seems to know now that, he's blessed by God. So it behooves him to make friends. And he does.
Part of this makes me think of the phrase I remember hearing growing up is that fences make good neighbors. With the idea of, Isaac being on top of Abimelech's territory does not make for good neighbors. But because now there's room and they're not competing against each other, it does make sense that it's we just needed space, buddy. And his claim, we sent you away in peace, but you are obviously blessed. So we now we see that we want you on our side. We just didn't want you on top of us. Come on, let's work something out, kind of a thing. But he's kind of coming with his hat in his hand of I know we made you mad. So they have a feast, they ate, they drank, and in the morning they rose early and exchanged oaths, and Isaac sent them on the way, and they departed from him in peace. So we have the establishment that he can stay in the land. He kind of has, I don't know if claim to the land, but he has permission almost to be there without having to be aggressive, which I don't think a war for either of them would have been beneficial. Neither of them really wanted to lose people or resources. War is expensive, and so they've found a way to negotiate it. And then at the bottom, they dig a well and they find water again. This is where it's seems like a funny repetition of all of a sudden they already had a well, but now they dig another one, they find water. Therefore, the city is named Beersheba, and he calls it Sheba. This is a naming of a well that already was named, or the name used for this is the well of the oath or the well of the seven, which, if you remember way back, that's the well that Abraham also names this area, the well in this area. I actually did not look back to see which version it was. At any rate, this is likely the well they were referencing that was filled in at the beginning of the story, which is why, where was it? At verse 15 earlier, it says, now the Philistines had stopped up and filled with earth the well that his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham. That was the well of the oath or the well of the seven. And so after making another covenant with another king, Abimelech, they dug a well of the oath or a well of the seven. So there's the reestablishment of the well to kind of just make the story make sense in the larger narrative. So this, I don't know if this is an editorial edit, but you can kind of see how they're trying to make sense of it in and of itself. Yeah, Mary Ellen.
Doesn't a well in their age also indicate security and permanence and the opposite of their nomadic life, that, they're settled here now, they have water.
So yeah, they have reliable water that does not rely on the seasons. Now, granted, the level of the well will go up and down, but yeah, that's why you sink a well, is all of a sudden you're no longer dependent on the rain and gathering rainwater. You have a stable source. So it does limit it. We see in the nomadic peoples that we've been able to study that they sometimes sunk multiple wells, and so they could still like mini migrate around to make sure they weren't overgrazing. So sometimes there's multiple wells, but yeah, there is a sense of stability. And we will see that Isaac is not as nomadic as his father. He kind of stays in this area for a lot longer.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I'm out.
So the last bit to discuss today is the last 2 verses. So we kind of, with the establishment of Beersheba and that well, we kind of get that kind of concludes Isaac as being one of the main characters, and we shift perspectives again, and we get these 2 lines about Esau. So Esau, when he's 40 years old, he marries Judith, the daughter of a Hittite, and Basemeth, the daughter of another Hittite, and they made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah. Slight geographical thing, they're in the land of the Philistines, in the kind of the southern end of their territory. The Hittites are an empire that is way to the north of them, more like in modern day, not quite Turkey, but like way north up there. That's where the Hittites are. So they would be immigrants to this area too, but we have Isaac taking 2 wives, or not Isaac, Esau taking 2 wives, and evidently his parents are not happy about it. So what do you all think?
One more thing, huh? They just get
Mhm.
the Hittites are usually not the good guys, as I recall. No.
No.
So I wonder why Esau decided. It was an odd choice if he knew it was going to cause trouble. I mean, wouldn't he know that?
So
You can have 2 wives.
And
That's trouble.
where was his first wife from? I don't remember.
no, so this verse has him marry the 2 women like back to back.
Okay.
So Judith, the daughter of Beri the Hittite, and Basemeth, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. So we don't know
it's 2
if
different
he married
people.
them at the same time or like one after the other, but he takes on 2 wives fairly quickly.
And the 2 of them, so they're probably fighting then, huh?
We don't really get much story about Esau's wives and marital situation. We get the fact that Isaac and Rebekah are not happy. So
Right.
what tradition is he breaking with? I think that may be one way to think about it. What did he do that was different than his dad?
No.
His dad told him, his dad was told to go back to Egypt and get a wife.
Oh, not Egypt,
Oh,
the other direction, but yes, yeah. Go back
Yes.
to the family area and get a wife from
Get
our
a wife.
people.
And the family had nothing to say about Esau. Esau, it sounds like he just did it and brought back 2.
Right. He doesn't consult the family. He just takes 2 wives, not from his own people, but from just the rival tribe. He takes 2 rival women and is just like, okay, yeah, these are my wives now.
Kind of strange.
Which means they're also likely culturally different. I know our brain kind of melds together a lot of ancient cultures, but these women are from a very different culture. So what does bringing people from different cultures that your parents did not approve of, what kind of dynamics does that bring into the situation?
It's not going to be a happy family.
But it's also odd because Esau was supposed to be Isaac's favorite.
Mhm.
So why would he do that? To
Ah.
kind of nose at his father, unless this is something that happened later. It's strange.
He may not have known that his dad would take objection to this. I don't know. Or he was just doing what he wanted. We've seen Esau before. So he came in and from hunting and he's like, give me some of that red stuff. And what was some of our assumptions in that part of the story? Esau may not be the brightest bulb in the box.
Oh, okay.
And so there's yeah, Larry.
Well, the other thing is, it says that Esau's marrying these two Hittite women made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah, but it doesn't really define what bitter is.
So unlike today, where we kind of have a very big push that once you get a job for yourself, you kind of move out and you start your own life and your own family and you'll buy your own house. Esau and Jacob are still living with their parents, and they will until he dies. Or like the assumption is like, you still live together. You will have your own tent, but Isaac and Rebekah are the matriarch and patriarch of the family. Ultimately, until they pass away, it is a very patriarchal culture, which means Isaac should be the head of the family, literally until he dies. Esau does not ask permission to marry. He does not consult his parents, which would be actually an insult to his parents, let alone that he doesn't ask permission, doesn't get guidance as to what would be best for the family. He then goes out and marries outsiders, which, because they are living as like a multi-generational family, I very much sympathize with Rebekah, who all of a sudden is dealing with two women who come from a different family culture with different traditions, who may not be able to speak the same language initially, who will be competing over the right way to do things.
So did Esau have to go running up to Hittite country and find these women and marry them and bring them back down to the family homestead?
Maybe. And there may be Hittite people who, like, the ancient society was a lot more migratory than I think a lot of people imagine. So there might have been Hittites where they were. You also remember Esau's the hunter. He goes out and wanders a lot.
Gotcha.
So who knows where he met them? It's kind of his thing to just go out hunting. And so he may have gone out hunting, wandered into a different tribe of people, met people at a tent, and just be like, oh, you have two available daughters? That sounds good. I'll take them.
Gotcha.
The assumption is Esau's not really thinking long-term about the effects that bringing these two women to his family is going to do.
Okay.
And evidently, it's not the best situation. Why it's bitter? We don't know. It's certainly not what his parents wanted.
Okay.
And is that the only time that gets mentioned? No, okay.
So this comes to be very important with how Jacob, how do I say this? This sets up some conflict between Esau and Jacob. Where we're about to go into the Jacob narrative. This is, once again, I don't like how the chapters break down, because I think this should have just been added into the top of 27, because it kind of is just this little tagline at the end of 26. But the rest of but like I said, this is kind of the end of Isaac being the main character, and he's never really a very assertive main character to begin with. He kind of just like goes along with the flow. And Jacob is going to become the main character. And one of the things of contention is the fact that how does Jacob differ from Esau, and Esau trying to be a little bit more Jacob-like occasionally? and then how Rebecca responds to Jacob in making sure that if Esau didn't do what she wanted, at least Jacob will do what she wants. And this is where we see a lot of Rebecca's agency, that she makes choices on her son's behalf, because evidently the older twin is a disappointment. And so her whole attention gets put on Jacob to be the son she wants him to be, if that makes sense. So this is kind of a setup for the rest of Jacob's story. And because Esau's isn't doing the sonly duties they want him to. He's not living up to being the kind of patriarch they want. He's kind of just doing his own thing. To different effects, so.
If he's out shooting all the time, out hunting all the time, he wouldn't be able to do the job anyway.
Right.
To stay home.
Yeah, I think it was last time we were talking about when it said like Esau despised his birthright. It's in kind of the thought of like, did he even want to inherit the family business? Did he have a good temperament to run the family business? And what does it mean if the person who is supposed to take over actually is not a good fit? And this is once again where we kind of see where it's like, is Esau really setting himself up for success? So, well, with that, are there any other thoughts of the Isaac story? Our 1 week focusing on Isaac. Final thoughts with him. Okay. Well, I will let you all go then. We will jump fully into the Jacob story, and we get to talk about what it means to be an actual trickster next week. But can I close this in a word of prayer?
Sure.
God of the covenant, we come before you today knowing that you are a God who interacts with people generation after generation, and we're people who were often born into religious beliefs, not always choosing them, but growing up with them because of the faith of our parents and our grandparents on through the generation. And we thank you that you do work with people generation for generation, that we don't have to build a relationship with you from scratch, but God, you use our family members, those that we know and those that we don't know, in a way that allows us to know you, to know how you've worked in the past, so we can rely on you for how you will interact with us in the future, so we can trust you and rely on you and know that you will be with us. Just like you were there for Abraham and like you were there for even Isaac, trusting that, yes, even like them, we are a blessed people meant for abundance and security, people that are meant to live full and happy lives. And so we lean into that promise that you gave all those generations ago, but we also trust that it's true today. And we thank you for that. So we pray all these things in the name of Jesus, the one who opened that covenant to all the people of the world. Amen. All right. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you all next week.
Okay, see you all next week.
All right, bye-bye.